Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel English Avenue. Today we are going to learn the history of one of the most powerful empires in the world, the Spanish Empire. This is not just a history of one country. This is the story of how Spain rose from a divided land in Europe and became a global empire. At one time, Spanish ships crossed oceans. Spanish soldiers entered new continents. Spanish kings ruled over lands in Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Spanish became one of the most spoken languages in the world. Spanish culture, religion, architecture, food, music, and traditions spread across many countries. But the history of the Spanish Empire is not only about power and glory. It is also about war, conquest, suffering, slavery, greed, resistance, and the loss of many native cultures. So we must understand this empire honestly, because real history is never only beautiful. Real history has light and darkness together. The Spanish Empire changed the world. It connected Europe with the Americas. It brought gold and silver into global trade. It spread Christianity. It created new cities. It created new societies. It also destroyed many lives. It changed the destiny of millions of people. That is why this topic is so important. When we study the Spanish Empire, we do not only learn about Spain. We learn about power. We learn about ambition. We learn about exploration. We learn about human courage. We learn about human cruelty. We learn how one empire can shape language, religion, politics, trade, and culture for centuries. This history begins long before Spain became an empire. It begins in a land called the Iberian Peninsula. Today, this land includes Spain and Portugal. But in the beginning, it was not one united country. It was a land of many peoples, many kingdoms, many religions, and many battles. Part 1. The birth of Spain and the beginning of empire. Before Spain became a great empire, Spain first had to become Spain. Today, when we hear the word Spain, we imagine one country. But many centuries ago, the land was divided. There were different kingdoms, different rulers, different languages, different cultures, different religions. This land was called the Iberian Peninsula. It was in the southwest of Europe. It was surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Mediterranean Sea on the other. Because of this location, many people came to this land. Some came for trade, some came for power, some came for war, some came to build new lives. The Romans ruled this land for a long time. They built roads, they built cities, they brought Roman law, they spread the Latin language. They also helped spread Christianity. The influence of Rome was very deep. Even today, the Spanish language has roots in Latin, the language of ancient Rome. But the Roman Empire did not last forever. After Rome became weak, another group came to power. They were called the Visigoths. The Visigoths created a kingdom in Spain. But their rule also did not last forever. In the year 711, a huge change happened. Muslim armies came from North Africa and entered the Iberian Peninsula. They defeated the Visigothic rulers and took control of a large part of the land. The Muslim-ruled area became known as Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus became a very important place in history. It was known for learning, architecture, science, medicine, poetry, trade, and culture. Cities like Córdoba became famous centers of knowledge. There were beautiful buildings, libraries, markets, gardens, and schools. Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived in this land. Sometimes they lived peacefully. Sometimes there was tension. Sometimes there was conflict. History was not simple. But one thing is clear. Al-Andalus became one of the most advanced and cultured regions of medieval Europe. While Muslim rulers controlled much of the south, Christian kingdoms survived in the north. Slowly, these Christian kingdoms began to grow stronger. They wanted to take back land from Muslim rulers. This long process is called the Reconquista. Reconquista means reconquest. But it was not one simple war. It lasted for many centuries. There were battles, there were alliances, there were political deals, there were marriages, there were betrayals, there were victories and defeats. The Christian kingdoms slowly expanded south. Important kingdoms included Castile, Aragon, Leon, Navarre, and Portugal. Castile became very powerful. Aragon also became powerful, especially near the Mediterranean Sea. But Spain was still not united. It was still a collection of kingdoms. Then two people changed the future of Spain: Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. Their marriage was one of the most important events in Spanish history. When Ferdinand and Isabella married, two powerful kingdoms came together. This did not make Spain completely modern in one day. Castile and Aragon still had many separate laws and systems, but their marriage created a strong political union. Together, Ferdinand and Isabella became known as the Catholic monarchs. They wanted a stronger kingdom. They wanted religious unity. They wanted more power. They wanted more control. And they wanted to finish the long fight against the last Muslim kingdom in Spain. That last Muslim kingdom was Granada. Granada was in southern Spain. It was beautiful, rich, and famous for its culture. Its palaces, gardens, and buildings showed the beauty of Islamic civilization in Spain. But by the late 1400s, Granada was weak compared to the united power of Ferdinand and Isabella. After a long war, Granada surrendered in 1492. This was a major turning point. The fall of Granada ended Muslim political rule in Spain. For Ferdinand and Isabella, it was a great victory. It gave them power, pride, and confidence. But for many Muslims and Jews, this period became very painful. Many people faced pressure to convert to Christianity. Some were forced to leave. Some were punished. Some lost their freedom. This is important to remember. The rise of Spain was not peaceful for everyone. For some people, it was victory. For others, it was suffering. In the same year, 1492, another event changed the world forever. A sailor named Christopher Columbus asked Ferdinand and Isabella for support. Columbus believed he could reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean. At that time, Europeans wanted new trade routes to Asia. They wanted spices, silk, gold, and other valuable goods. Portugal was already exploring sea routes around Africa. Spain also wanted wealth and power from overseas trade. So Ferdinand and Isabella supported Columbus. Columbus sailed west in 1492. But he did not reach Asia. He reached islands in the Caribbean. This moment changed world history. For Spain, it opened the door to a new empire. For Europe, it began a new age of overseas expansion. But for the native people of the Americas, this was not a new world. It was already their home. They had lived there for thousands of years. They had their own languages, their own families, their own religions, their own traditions, their own cities, their own civilizations. So when Europeans arrived, they were not finding empty land. They were entering lands where millions of people already lived. This is one of the most important truths in the history of the Spanish Empire. The empire was built on exploration, but also on conquest. It was built on courage, but also on violence. It was built on faith, but also on control. After Columbus's voyage, Spain began to build settlements in the Caribbean. Spanish ships crossed the Atlantic again and again. They carried sailors, soldiers, settlers, priests, animals, tools, weapons, and ideas. They also carried diseases. These diseases were very dangerous for native people. Many native communities had no protection against European diseases. Because of this, millions of people died over time. This was one of the greatest tragedies of the early Spanish Empire. Spanish settlers wanted land. They wanted gold. They wanted labor. They wanted control. Many native people were forced to work. Many were treated cruelly. Many lost their homes, freedom, and culture. So, the beginning of the Spanish Empire was not only a story of adventure. It was also a story of deep human suffering. Spain became richer. Spain became stronger. But many indigenous people paid a terrible price. Indigenous means the original people of a place. While Spain was expanding west, Portugal was also expanding overseas. Portugal had already explored parts of Africa and the Atlantic world. Both Spain and Portugal wanted power. Both wanted trade. Both wanted land. Both wanted wealth. To avoid conflict between them, Spain and Portugal made an agreement. This agreement divided newly claimed lands between the two kingdoms. Spain received rights to many lands in the west. Portugal received rights to many lands in the east. This is one reason why much of Latin America later became Spanish-speaking, while Brazil became Portuguese-speaking. But we should also understand something clearly. European kings were dividing lands on paper. But those lands already had people. They already had owners. They already had cultures. They already had history. This shows us how powerful countries often looked at the world. They saw land, wealth, and opportunity. But they often ignored the lives of the people already living there. As Spain built its early empire, religion became very important. Spain was a deeply Catholic kingdom. The rulers believed they had a mission to spread Christianity. Priests traveled with explorers and settlers. Churches were built. Missions were created. Native people were taught Christianity. But sometimes this was not peaceful. Sometimes conversion happened with pressure. Sometimes it happened with force. Religion gave Spain a reason to expand, but it also became a tool of control. This made the Spanish Empire very complex. It spread Christianity, language, and new systems. But it also damaged older beliefs, traditions, and cultures. At the same time, Spanish explorers began to hear stories of great wealth on the mainland. They heard about powerful kingdoms, great cities, gold, silver, large populations, strong rulers. These stories attracted ambitious men. These men were called conquistadors. Conquistador means conqueror. They were soldiers, adventurers, and fortune seekers. Many of them wanted gold. Many wanted fame. Many wanted land. Many wanted power. Some also believed they were spreading Christianity. But their actions often brought destruction. The early Spanish Empire was driven by a dangerous mix: faith, greed, courage, ambition, violence, and dreams of glory. By the early 1500s, Spain was no longer just a kingdom in Europe. It was becoming a global power. Its ships crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Its colonies grew in the Caribbean. Its soldiers prepared to move deeper into the Americas. Its rulers dreamed of more land and more wealth. Spain was standing at the beginning of a new age. A small group of kingdoms had become united. A war in Granada had ended. A voyage across the ocean had opened a new world of power. And now, Spain was ready to build one of the largest empires in history. But the next chapter would be even more dramatic, because Spain would soon meet two of the greatest civilizations in the Americas, the Aztec Empire and the Inca Empire. There would be battles, alliances, betrayals, gold, silver, resistance, and the creation of Spanish America. Part 2. Conquest, Gold, Silver, and the Birth of Spanish America. After the early Spanish colonies grew in the Caribbean, Spain began looking toward the mainland of the Americas. At first, the Spanish did not fully understand the size and power of the lands they had entered. They thought about islands. They thought about gold. They thought about trade. They thought about spreading Christianity. But soon, they heard stories about great civilizations on the mainland, stories of rich cities, powerful rulers, large armies, beautiful temples, gold, silver, and great wealth. These stories reached Spanish soldiers and adventurers, and many of them became hungry for more. They did not want only small settlements. They wanted kingdoms. They wanted treasure. They wanted fame. They wanted land. They wanted power. This was the age of the conquistadors. Conquistadors were Spanish conquerors. They were soldiers and adventurers who went into the Americas to conquer land for Spain. Some were brave. Some were clever. Some were cruel. Some were religious. Some were greedy. Many were all of these things together. They believed they were building greatness. But for many native people, they brought destruction. This is why Part 2 is very important, because this is the part where Spain moved from exploration to conquest. The Spanish Empire became powerful not only because of ships. It became powerful because it defeated great civilizations, controlled huge lands, and took enormous wealth from the Americas. One of the first and most famous conquests was the conquest of the Aztec Empire. The Aztec Empire was in central Mexico. Its capital city was Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was one of the greatest cities in the world at that time. It was built on an island in a lake. It had temples, markets, roads, canals, bridges, gardens, and thousands of people. To the Spanish, it looked unbelievable. They had never seen anything like it. The Aztecs were powerful. They had strong rulers. They had warriors. They controlled many other groups around them. But not everyone loved Aztec rule. Some local groups were angry because the Aztecs demanded taxes, tribute, and power over them. Tribute means money, goods, food, or service given to a ruler. This became very important, because when the Spanish arrived, they did not defeat the Aztecs alone. They made alliances with native groups who were enemies of the Aztecs. An alliance means working together for a common goal. The leader of the Spanish expedition was Hernán Cortés. Cortés arrived in Mexico in 1519. He did not have a very large Spanish army, but he had horses, metal weapons, guns, and armor. These things were new and frightening to many people in the region. He also had ambition. He wanted glory. He wanted wealth. He wanted to conquer. Cortés and his men moved toward Tenochtitlan. Along the way, they met different native groups. Some fought them. Some joined them. One very important person in this story was a woman often known as La Malinche. She could speak local languages and later helped Cortés as a translator. She played a major role because language was power. Without communication, Cortés could not understand local politics. He could not make alliances. He could not negotiate. He could not control situations so easily. La Malinche is remembered in different ways. Some see her as a survivor. Some see her as a translator. Some see her as controversial. Her life shows us how complex history can be. In 1519, Cortés entered Tenochtitlan and met the Aztec emperor, Moctezuma. At first, there was tension, but also ceremony and diplomacy. Diplomacy means dealing with other leaders through discussion and political behavior. But the relationship did not remain peaceful. The Spanish took Moctezuma as a prisoner. Violence increased. Trust broke down. The Aztec people became angry. The Spanish were forced to leave the city during a terrible night of fighting. Many Spanish soldiers died, but Cortés did not give up. He gathered his forces again. He returned with Spanish soldiers and many native allies. Tenochtitlan was attacked. The city suffered badly. Disease also spread among the Aztec people. European diseases, especially smallpox, killed many people. This made resistance even harder. Finally, in 1521, Tenochtitlan fell. The Aztec Empire was defeated. This was a huge moment in world history. Spain now controlled one of the richest and most powerful areas in the Americas. The Spanish destroyed much of Tenochtitlan and built Mexico City on top of it. Mexico City became the center of Spanish power in New Spain. New Spain was the name of Spain's large colony in North America and Central America. But we must remember something clearly. The fall of the Aztec Empire was not only a Spanish victory, it was also a native tragedy. A great city was broken. A powerful civilization was defeated. Many people died. Old temples were destroyed. New churches were built. New laws were created. New rulers arrived. The world of the Aztec people changed forever. After the conquest of the Aztecs, Spanish attention turned to another great civilization, the Inca Empire. The Inca Empire was in South America. It was one of the largest and most organized empires in the world. It stretched along the Andes Mountains. The Andes are a long mountain range in South America. The Inca Empire included areas that are today part of Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, and other regions. The Inca had amazing roads, strong government systems, terraces for farming, storehouses for food, messengers who ran across mountains, beautiful stone buildings, and a powerful emperor. Their capital was Cusco. The Inca Empire was rich in gold and silver. This attracted the Spanish. The main Spanish conqueror of the Inca Empire was Francisco Pizarro. Pizarro was also a conquistador. Like Cortés, he wanted wealth and power. He arrived in the Inca world at a very important time. The Inca Empire was already weakened by internal conflict. There had been a civil war between two brothers who wanted power. A civil war means a war between people from the same country or empire. The two brothers were Atahualpa and Huáscar. Atahualpa had won the struggle, but the empire was not stable. Many people were tired. Many areas were divided. Then the Spanish arrived. This gave Pizarro an opportunity. In 1532, Pizarro met Atahualpa at Cajamarca. The Spanish had fewer men, but they planned carefully. They captured Atahualpa in a surprise attack. This was a shocking event. The emperor of one of the greatest empires in the world was suddenly a prisoner. Atahualpa offered a huge ransom. A ransom means payment given to free a prisoner. He promised rooms filled with gold and silver. The Spanish accepted the treasure. But even after receiving it, they killed Atahualpa. This act showed the cruelty and hunger for power that shaped many parts of the conquest. After Atahualpa's death, the Spanish continued taking control. The Inca Empire did not fall in one moment. There was resistance. There were battles. There were leaders who fought back. Some Inca resistance continued for many years. But Spanish power grew. By 1533, the Spanish entered Cusco. Later, they built Lima, which became an important Spanish city in South America. The conquest of the Inca Empire gave Spain enormous wealth. Gold and silver began flowing into Spanish hands. But again, this wealth came through suffering. Native people were forced to work. Communities were controlled. Land was taken. Old systems were broken. The Spanish Empire became rich, but many indigenous people lost freedom, safety, and life. After these conquests, Spain began building a new colonial system in the Americas. A colonial system means the way an empire controls its colonies. Spain could not control such huge lands only with soldiers. It needed laws, officials, cities, churches, tax systems, labor systems, trade systems, and rulers. So Spain created large administrative regions called viceroyalties. A viceroyalty was a territory ruled by a viceroy. A viceroy was a representative of the Spanish king. He ruled in the king's name. One important viceroyalty was New Spain. New Spain included Mexico, Central America, parts of the Caribbean, and later other territories. Another important viceroyalty was Peru. Peru became the center of Spanish power in South America. These viceroyalties helped Spain control its American empire. Spanish officials collected taxes. They controlled trade. They managed land. They enforced royal laws. They supported the church. And they tried to keep power in Spanish hands. Spanish cities became centers of control. Cities like Mexico City and Lima became powerful colonial capitals. They had government buildings, churches, markets, schools, courts, and wealthy Spanish families. But outside these cities, life was very different for many native people. Many were forced into hard labor. One important system was called the encomienda. The encomienda system gave Spanish settlers control over groups of indigenous people. In theory, the Spanish were supposed to protect and teach them Christianity. But in reality, many used this system to force native people to work. It became a system of exploitation. Exploitation means using people unfairly for your own benefit. Native people worked in farms, mines, construction, and other hard jobs. Many suffered hunger, sickness, violence, and exhaustion. Another important labor system was connected to mining. Mining became one of the main sources of Spanish wealth. The Spanish found huge silver deposits in the Americas. One of the most famous silver mines was Potosí in present-day Bolivia. Potosí became one of the richest mining centers in the world. Silver from Potosí and other mines changed the Spanish Empire. It made Spain extremely wealthy. It helped pay for armies, ships, palaces, wars, and trade. Spanish silver traveled across oceans. It went to Europe. It went to Asia. It became part of global trade. In many ways, silver connected the world economy. But the human cost was terrible. Many indigenous workers were forced to work in dangerous mines. The air was bad. The work was hard. The conditions were deadly. Many people died. So when we talk about Spanish silver, we must remember both sides. For Spain, it was wealth. For many workers, it was suffering. This is the truth of empire. The same gold and silver that made Spain powerful also carried the pain of the people who were forced to produce it. The Spanish also brought many changes to daily life in the Americas. They brought horses, cattle, sheep, wheat, sugarcane, and new tools. They built churches, towns, roads, and schools. They introduced European laws and customs. They spread the Spanish language. They spread Catholic Christianity. At the same time, new things also moved from the Americas to Europe. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, cacao, tobacco, and many other products. This great exchange between the Old World and the New World is often called the Columbian Exchange. It changed diets, farming, trade, health, and population across the world. For example, potatoes later became very important in Europe. Tomatoes became important in many cuisines. Cacao became chocolate. Corn spread to many parts of the world. But the exchange also included diseases, forced labor, slavery, and cultural destruction. So again, history is mixed. It brought connection, but it also brought pain. As Spanish America grew, a new society began to form. This society was not exactly Spanish. It was not exactly indigenous. It became a mixture of many people and cultures. Spanish settlers came from Europe. Indigenous people remained in their lands, though under colonial control. Africans were also brought to the Americas through the Atlantic slave trade. Many were forced to work in plantations, mines, and cities. This created a society with deep inequality. Inequality means unfair difference between people. At the top were people born in Spain. They were often called peninsulares. They usually held the highest positions in government and church. Below them were people of Spanish descent born in the Americas. They were called criollos or creoles. They were often wealthy, but they did not always have the same power as people born in Spain. Then came mixed groups. Mestizos were people of Spanish and indigenous ancestry. Mulattoes were people of European and African ancestry. There were also indigenous people and enslaved Africans, who often faced the worst treatment. This social system created division. Your birth, race, family background, and legal status affected your opportunities. This system shaped Latin American society for centuries. Spanish America became rich and powerful, but it was not equal. Some people lived with wealth and privilege. Many others lived under control and hardship. Religion also became a major force. The Catholic Church became one of the most powerful institutions in Spanish America. Churches were built in cities and villages. Priests taught Christianity. Missions were created to convert indigenous people. Religious festivals became part of daily life. The church also controlled education, marriage, morality, and community life. In some places, missionaries tried to protect indigenous people from the worst abuse. Some priests spoke against cruelty. One famous critic of Spanish abuse was Bartolomé de las Casas. He argued that native people should be treated as human beings with rights. But even when some people criticized cruelty, the colonial system continued to exploit many communities. So the church had a complex role. It helped spread religion, education, and social organization. But it was also connected to imperial power and cultural control. By the middle of the 1500s, Spain had become one of the strongest empires in the world. It controlled vast lands in the Americas. It had defeated the Aztec and Inca empires. It had created New Spain and Peru. It had built colonial cities. It had taken control of silver mines. It had created trade routes across the Atlantic, and it had started building a global economy. Spanish power was growing quickly. But power brings problems. Spain now had to defend its empire. It had to control huge distances. It had to manage many peoples. It had to protect silver fleets crossing the ocean. It had to fight enemies in Europe. It had to face pirates, rivals, rebellions, and resistance. The empire looked strong, but inside it, many pressures were already beginning. Part 3. The Golden Age, Global Power, and the Empire, where the sun never set. By the middle of the 1500s, Spain had become one of the most powerful kingdoms on Earth. It had lands in Europe. It had colonies in the Americas. It had gold and silver from the New World. It had soldiers, ships, cities, churches, and trade routes. Spain was no longer just a European country. Spain was becoming a world empire. This period is often remembered as Spain's Golden Age. A Golden Age means a time of great power, wealth, culture, art, and influence. But Spain's Golden Age was not simple. It was full of glory, but also full of war. It was full of wealth, but also full of debt. It was full of faith, but also full of conflict. It was full of beautiful art and literature, but also full of suffering in the colonies. The empire was shining, but deep inside, cracks were slowly growing. One of the most important rulers of this period was Charles. He became King Charles I of Spain. He also became Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. This made him one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. Charles did not rule only Spain. He ruled many lands in Europe. He also ruled over Spain's growing empire in the Americas. His territories were so large that one person could hardly control them all. Spain was connected to Germany, the Netherlands, parts of Italy, and the Americas. This made Charles powerful, but it also gave him many problems. He had to fight wars in Europe. He had to deal with religious conflict. He had to defend his lands from enemies. He had to manage wealth coming from the Americas. He had to control a huge empire from far away. At that time, Europe was changing deeply. The Protestant Reformation began. This was a religious movement that challenged the power of the Catholic Church. Many people in Europe became Protestant. But Spain remained strongly Catholic. Charles saw himself as a defender of Catholic Christianity. This created many wars and tensions. Spain's empire was not only political, it was also religious. Spanish rulers believed they had a mission to protect and spread Catholic faith. This belief shaped the way Spain ruled. It shaped its wars. It shaped its colonies. It shaped its identity. After Charles, his son Philip II became King of Spain. Philip II is one of the most famous rulers in Spanish history. He ruled during a time when Spain was extremely powerful. Under Philip II, Spain controlled large parts of the Americas. It controlled the Philippines in Asia. It had influence in Europe. It had strong armies. It had silver fleets crossing the Atlantic. It had a great navy. Philip II ruled from Spain and tried to manage a worldwide empire. He was serious, religious, hardworking, and strict. He believed Spain had a special role in defending Catholic Christianity. He also believed royal power should be strong. During his rule, Spain became even more connected to the world. One of the most important parts of this global empire was the Philippines. The Philippines were named after Philip II. Spanish explorers crossed the Pacific Ocean and created a colony there. This gave Spain a strong position in Asia. The city of Manila became very important. Manila became a center of trade between Asia and the Americas. Spanish ships called Manila galleons sailed between Manila and Acapulco in Mexico. A galleon was a large sailing ship used for trade and war. These ships carried silver from the Americas to Asia. They carried silk, spices, porcelain, and other Asian goods back toward the Spanish world. This trade connected Asia, the Americas, and Europe. It made the Spanish Empire truly global. Silver from mines in the Americas helped power this global trade. This was one of Spain's greatest strengths, but also one of its weaknesses. Spain received huge amounts of silver. At first, this made Spain rich. The king could pay soldiers. The empire could build ships. Spain could buy goods from other countries. It could fund wars. It could look powerful. But too much easy wealth can become dangerous. Spain began to depend too much on silver from the Americas. Instead of building a stronger economy at home, Spain often used silver to pay for wars and imports. Imports are goods bought from other countries. Money came in quickly. But money also went out quickly. The empire looked rich, but the foundation was not always strong. This is an important lesson from history. Wealth does not always mean strength. If wealth is not managed wisely, it can create weakness. Spain had silver. But Spain also had huge expenses. Wars were expensive. Ships were expensive. Armies were expensive. Defending a global empire was expensive. And Spain had many enemies. One major enemy was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were a powerful Muslim empire based around modern Turkey and surrounding regions. They controlled important lands in the eastern Mediterranean. Spain and the Ottomans fought for power in the Mediterranean Sea. One famous battle was the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. Spain was part of a Christian alliance that fought the Ottoman navy. The Christian alliance won. This was a major victory for Spain and Catholic Europe. It gave Spain pride and confidence. But victory did not end all problems. The Mediterranean remained a dangerous and important region. Another major conflict happened in the Netherlands. The Netherlands were under Spanish control, but many people there wanted independence. There were also religious tensions because many people became Protestant. Spain tried to keep control, but the Dutch resisted. This led to a long and costly war. The Dutch revolt became one of Spain's greatest struggles. It showed that controlling faraway European lands was very difficult. People did not always accept Spanish rule. The empire was powerful, but not everyone wanted to be part of it. Then came one of the most famous events in Spanish history, the Spanish Armada. Philip II wanted to invade England. England had become Protestant under Queen Elizabeth I. England also supported Spain's enemies. English ships attacked Spanish treasure ships, so Spain prepared a huge fleet. This fleet was called the Spanish Armada. In 1588, the Armada sailed toward England. Spain believed this powerful navy could defeat England. But things did not go as planned. The English navy fought strongly. Spanish plans were confused. Bad weather damaged the fleet. Many ships were lost. The Armada failed. This was a major shock. Spain was still powerful after this defeat. The empire did not collapse immediately. But the failure of the Armada showed that Spain was not unbeatable. It showed that other sea powers were rising. England and the Netherlands were becoming stronger. They would later challenge Spain across the oceans. At the same time, Spain was creating a great culture. This was the Spanish Golden Age in art and literature. Spanish writers, painters, and thinkers became famous. Miguel de Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, one of the greatest novels in world literature. The story of Don Quixote is funny, deep, and powerful. It is about dreams, illusion, reality, courage, and human weakness. Spanish theater also became important. Painters like El Greco and later Diego Velázquez created unforgettable art. Spanish architecture, music, religion, and education also influenced many parts of the empire. So while Spain fought wars and ruled colonies, it also created culture that still lives today. This is another truth about empire. An empire can create beauty and suffering at the same time. Spain gave the world great art and literature, but Spain also built power through conquest and exploitation. Both truths exist together. In the Americas, Spanish colonial society continued to grow. Cities became larger, churches became richer, universities were created, trade expanded, Spanish language spread, Catholic festivals became part of daily life. New cultures formed from Spanish, indigenous, and African influences. This mixing created new identities, new foods, new music, new traditions, new communities, but the colonial system still had deep inequality. People born in Spain often had more power. Creoles, people of Spanish descent born in the Americas, wanted more influence. Indigenous people continued to suffer under taxes, labor demands, and loss of land. Africans and their descendants suffered under slavery and discrimination. So, Spanish America was both creative and unequal. It was a new world of culture, but also a world of control. By the early 1600s, Spain still looked very strong. Its empire was huge. Its king was powerful. Its colonies were rich. Its culture was shining. But problems were growing. Wars had drained money. Silver created inflation. Inflation means prices rise and money loses value. The government had large debts. Spain's industries were not as strong as they needed to be. Other countries were building stronger trade systems. England, France, and the Netherlands were growing in power. Pirates and privateers attacked Spanish ships. A privateer was a private ship allowed by a government to attack enemy ships. Spain had to spend more and more money protecting its empire. This is how decline often begins. Not suddenly, slowly. An empire can look powerful from outside while becoming weaker inside. Spain still had glory. But glory was becoming expensive. Spain still had silver. But silver was not solving everything. Spain still had colonies. But colonies were hard to control. Spain still had faith and pride. But faith and pride could not stop every enemy. Part 3 ends here. Spain had reached a height of its global power. It had become an empire across Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Its ships connected oceans. Its silver changed world trade. Its culture entered a golden age. But behind the golden image, danger was growing. Debt, war, rivals, inequality, rebellion, and the heavy cost of ruling too much land. Part 4. Decline, independence, and the legacy of the Spanish Empire. The Spanish Empire did not fall in one day. It declined slowly, like an old building with cracks in the walls. From outside, it still looked strong, but inside, many things were weakening. Spain had ruled a huge empire, but huge empires are difficult to control. They need money, soldiers, ships, good leaders, strong communication, loyal colonies, and stable government. Spain had many lands, but it also had many problems. The first major problem was war. Spain fought too many wars for too long. Wars in Europe, wars against Protestant powers, wars against France, wars against the Dutch, wars on the sea, wars to defend colonies. Every war cost money. Every army needed payment. Every ship needed supplies. Every defeat created more pressure. The second problem was debt. Spain received silver from the Americas, but it spent too much. The government borrowed money again and again. When silver arrived, Much of it went to pay debts and fund new wars. So Spain was rich in treasure, but weak in financial control. This is one of history's great lessons. Money can make a country powerful, but bad management can make that power disappear. The third problem was the rise of rivals. England became stronger, France became stronger, the Netherlands became stronger. These countries built powerful navies. They expanded trade. They created colonies. They challenged Spain on the seas. They attacked Spanish ships. They competed for land and influence. Spain no longer controlled the oceans alone. The fourth problem was distance. Spain's empire was too large. The king in Spain could not easily control everything happening in Mexico, Peru, the Caribbean, the Philippines, and other faraway places. Messages took months to travel. Officials had too much power. Corruption grew. Local elites became stronger. Colonies began to develop their own interests. The fifth problem was inequality in the colonies. In Spanish America, many people were unhappy. Indigenous people suffered from taxes, forced labor, and loss of land. Africans and their descendants suffered under slavery and discrimination. Mixed-race communities faced social limits. Creoles were often wealthy and educated, but they were frustrated because the highest positions were often given to people born in Spain. This created anger. The colonies were not equal societies. They were societies full of tension. For many years, Spain kept control, but the desire for change was growing. In the 1700s, a new royal family came to power in Spain, the Bourbons. The Bourbon kings tried to reform the empire. Reform means to change something to make it better or stronger. They wanted more control over the colonies. They wanted more tax money. They wanted stronger armies. They wanted better trade. They wanted to reduce corruption. These changes are often called the Bourbon reforms. Some reforms helped Spain become more organized, but they also made many people in the colonies angry. Why? Because Spain wanted to take more wealth from the colonies. Spain wanted more control. Spanish officials became stricter. Taxes increased. Local people felt less freedom. Creoles felt insulted because Spain still did not give them full political power. So the reforms made the empire stronger in one way, but weaker in another way. They created more resentment. Resentment means deep anger because people feel unfairly treated. Then, in the early 1800s, something dramatic happened in Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte of France invaded Spain. This was a disaster for Spanish power. Napoleon forced the Spanish king to give up the throne and placed his own brother on the Spanish throne. Many Spanish people rejected this. They fought against French control. Spain entered a period of war and chaos. This was very important for the colonies, because if Spain itself was weak and confused, how could it control a huge empire across the ocean? In Spanish America, many people began to ask serious questions. Who should rule us if the Spanish king has lost power? Should we obey officials sent from Spain? Should we create our own governments? Should we remain colonies? Or should we become independent? Independent means free from control by another country. These questions became the beginning of independence movements. In the early 1800s, revolutions spread across Spanish America. Leaders rose in different regions. They wanted freedom from Spanish rule. One of the most famous leaders was Simón Bolívar. He helped lead independence movements in northern South America. Another famous leader was José de San Martín. He helped fight for independence in southern South America. In Mexico, Miguel Hidalgo became an important early figure in the independence struggle. These movements were not simple. They were not one united fight. Different regions had different leaders, different goals, different social groups, different fears. Some people wanted full independence. Some wanted loyalty to the Spanish king. Some wanted political reform. Some wanted social change. Some elites wanted independence, but still wanted to keep their own power. Many ordinary people wanted land, dignity, and freedom from oppression. So, independence was complex. But one thing became clear. Spanish control was weakening. One by one, many Spanish-American colonies became independent. Mexico became independent. Much of Central America became independent. Large parts of South America became independent. New countries were born. Spain lost most of its empire in the Americas. This was one of the greatest changes in world history. For Spain, it was a massive loss. For Latin America, it was the beginning of a new era. But independence did not solve every problem. Many new countries still faced inequality, political conflict, poverty, and struggles for power. The old colonial system had left deep marks. Even after Spain left, many problems remained. This is important to understand. Ending an empire does not automatically heal all wounds. The legacy of empire can continue for centuries. After losing most of its American empire, Spain still kept some colonies. The most important were Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. But even these would not remain forever. In the 1800s, people in these colonies also wanted change. Cuba became especially important because of sugar plantations and slavery. Many people in Cuba wanted independence from Spain. There were wars and rebellions. Spain tried to keep control. But by the late 1800s, Spain was weak compared to rising powers. Then came the Spanish-American War in 1898. This war was fought between Spain and the United States. Spain lost. After this defeat, Spain lost Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This was a symbolic ending. The empire that once connected Europe, the Americas, and Asia had lost its last major overseas colonies. 1898 became a painful year in Spanish history. It showed that Spain was no longer a great imperial power. The age of the Spanish Empire was over. But the story did not disappear. Because empires leave legacies. A legacy means something that remains from the past. The Spanish Empire left a huge legacy across the world. The Spanish language became one of the most spoken languages on Earth. Today, hundreds of millions of people speak Spanish. Spanish culture spread across Latin America, the Caribbean, parts of the United States, and beyond. Catholic Christianity became deeply rooted in many countries. Spanish cities, churches, plazas, roads, laws, names, and traditions remain in many places. Many countries in Latin America still carry Spanish influence in language, religion, architecture, festivals, food, music, and family traditions. But the legacy is not only Spanish, it is mixed. Latin American cultures were shaped by Spanish, indigenous, African, and many other influences. This mixture created something new and powerful. New identities, new music, new foods, new languages and accents, new traditions, new ways of life. For example, many Latin American countries have Spanish language and Catholic traditions. But they also have indigenous roots, African rhythms, local foods, native words, and unique cultures. This shows that colonized people did not only receive culture, they also resisted. They adapted, they survived. They created new worlds from pain, memory, and strength. The Spanish Empire also left painful legacies. Colonialism created inequality. Many indigenous communities lost land and power. African slavery left deep wounds. Racial hierarchy affected society. Wealth was taken from colonies. Cultures were damaged. Languages disappeared. Many people were forced to live under systems they did not choose. These effects did not vanish when independence came. They continued in different forms. That is why studying the Spanish Empire is important. It helps us understand today's world. It helps us understand why Spanish is spoken across Latin America. It helps us understand why many countries share religion and culture. It helps us understand why inequality exists in many societies. It helps us understand how global trade began to connect continents. It helps us understand how power can create both beauty and suffering. The Spanish Empire was not only good, it was not only evil. It was human history on a massive scale, full of dreams and violence, faith and greed, courage and cruelty, creation and destruction, great art and terrible injustice. That is what makes it powerful to study. When we look at Spain's rise, we see ambition. When we look at its conquests, we see danger. When we look at its golden age, we see culture and power. When we look at its decline, we see the cost of pride, war, and overexpansion. And when we look at its legacy, we see how the past still lives in the present. Final ending. My friends, the history of the Spanish Empire is the history of a small European kingdom that became a global power. It began in the Iberian Peninsula. It grew through unity, war, exploration, and ambition. It crossed the Atlantic. It conquered great civilizations. It built cities and colonies. It spread language and religion. It created global trade. It became one of the largest empires in history. But it also caused deep suffering. Native people were conquered. Cultures were damaged. Workers were exploited. Africans were enslaved. Silver made Spain rich, but it also carried the pain of millions. This history teaches us one powerful lesson. Power without humanity becomes destruction. Ambition without justice becomes cruelty. Wealth without wisdom becomes weakness. And empire without respect for human life cannot last forever. Spain rose. Spain ruled. Spain shined. Spain declined. But its influence never fully disappeared. It still lives in languages, in cities, in churches, in music, in food, in names, in traditions, in the cultures of millions of people around the world. The Spanish Empire is gone, but its story is still alive. And when we study it, we do more than learn history. We learn about human nature. We learn how greatness is built. We learn how greatness can fall. And we learn why every powerful civilization must remember one truth. Real greatness is not only measured by land, gold, ships, and armies. Real greatness is measured by justice, wisdom, humanity, and the way power is used. That is the unforgettable history of the Spanish Empire.